Hey there riders, Journo Kris here today, and I have got Moto Guzzi's V9 Bobber, which is a really cool machine. I gotta say, it's a little bit different than what I'm used to riding. I do like sportier machines, even though I've kind of moved away from them in more recent years. And the last time I rode a V7, I thought it was a pretty languid kind of offering, and that was a long time ago. I think it was over 6 years ago. And since then, the power plant, which is actually in the V7 and the V9, has evolved considerably and gained some capacity and power and performance. And certainly jumping on this bike for the first time, I was really quite surprised at the level of performance on offer. This is not a sports machine by any kind of stretch of the imagination. However, I think since the last time I rode the V7, it's gained about 15 horsepower and 8 Newton meters of torque. And that increase in power has transformed the bike as far as I'm concerned. The last time I rode it, like I said, very kind of languid, it was relaxed. Now it's got a little bit more of an edge to it. It's got a little bit more of a bite to it. It's got nice torque delivery. It's not a high-speed machine. It's very much a machine that I think you can have a lot of fun on cruising. Today, doing between say 60 and 90 kilometers an hour. It was in its element cruising along. It's enjoyable, great feedback. You're just enjoying the experience. And certainly it delivers enormously on that. So if you're looking for something with really high performance, then perhaps Moto Guzzi's V9 is not the option for you. However, if you're looking for kind of like a gentleman's cruiser, something with a lot of character that's going to be fun. You'll also get a lot of people asking whether they are a modern or a retro or a classic bike, because they look at these and the family resemblance is very much there. And going to the Moto Guzzi New South Wales ride day, one thing I did notice is that at times it can be hard to tell the bikes, the old bikes and the new bikes apart, just because they've done such a great job in retaining that heritage. Keeping that in mind, non-adjustable suspension on the front, we've got the dual rear shocks on the rear with the preload adjustability, we've got the air-cooled engine, Brembo brakes, which is nice to see, the 16-inch wheels with quite a beefy tyre on them, but at the end of the day, it's a smaller tyre, which has quite a wide tyre on it and quite a deep tyre on it, which is all about the look of the bike. But the handling on this is good. It handles beautifully. It's quite relaxed. You can just take it easy through those corners and just pick your arcs, and it delivers as far as that. But if you want a bit of a turn of speed and you want to really get into those corners and be a little bit more aggressive, it also delivers on that as well. You can fasten up your lines quite easily. It's low at the rear, which again is very much a bobber thing. And certainly I would say that kind of adds to the enjoyment, that little bit lower at the rear. And when you do kind of give it a bit of input to get it through those corners, it responds beautifully. So from a handling perspective, I was blown away, because I do enjoy having a nice run through the twisties. I don't have to be going super fast, but I want it to be one of those experiences where you're very in tune with the bike, very in tune with the road, and the V9 was certainly delivering there. As far as getting a little bit more specific about the machine, the fueling I found was good. You've got really nice power delivery. It's a little bit on the relaxed side, but if you give it a fair bit of throttle, it will reward you with torque, and it does have that bite to it. So certainly getting in front of traffic or having a bit of fun, no problem at all. It's got kind of that dual nature going for it. Keep the revs down, sit at say 4,000 RPMs and everything's pretty relaxed. Very nice manners. Use a lot more force on the throttle, really give it some, and you've got a beautiful torquey machine. And certainly it's not like super V-twin torquey, but at the same time it is a beautiful, nice level of torque without being a crazy performance machine. It's just something that you can enjoy, and it's got a beautiful character to it. The exhausts, unfortunately, are quite quiet. You get a bit of a rumble in some situations, but if you wanted a nice exhaust note on this, you'd probably need to go for aftermarket pipes, and I think that is going to be rewarding. But if you don't mind them being fairly quiet and you're just happy with the character of the bike being quite muted, then certainly the stock pipes do that very, very well. And while again in the black, I'm not going to say that they really do anything super duper for me. The bike is brought very well together, and there's a lot of details. We've got the front guard with the Centenario sticker on it. We've got that mixture of the green and the silver, so the green on the guard and on the panels. We've got the silver tank. We've got a nicely designed seat in that brown with kind of a traditional design to it with the stitching. The attention to detail is good. There's a few areas where obviously, you know, you've got some wiring and stuff which is exposed, but overall I would say Moto Guzzi have kept it clean and the bike just really does look the business. Again, talking about a bobber, the suspension side of things, we are looking at more of a cruiser style machine, and suspension really, I would say, is kind of a weakness of cruisers. The non-adjustable front suspension certainly does the trick here. You can actually see there's a lot of travel being used, and as far as the tracking and really absorbing bumps, the front suspension was great. The rear, in fact, was good as well. One of the things I always find with the cruisers is when you get to the harsh bumps, you find that you get those bumps kind of sent back up through your spine, which can be quite uncomfortable, especially because you often can't take a lot of weight off your legs and through your legs, I guess you'd say, into the pegs. However, here, the system is very, very well tuned for me at, say, 70 kilos. There was very few times that really became harsh. I think probably, you know, after a couple of days riding, there's maybe 3 times where I've got a harsher bump through my spine and through the seat. But realistically speaking, a very nicely set up system considering the lack of adjustability. By the same note, the Brembo brakes on the front, good bit of power, easy control, easy modulation through the front. You've got a Brembo master cylinder there, but it's obviously not a radial master cylinder. Nice amount of braking power. I found the braking power on the rear was really good as well. There was a nice bite on the rear. I was probably using the rear a little bit more than the front. The combination of the two, well balanced, suits the bike. However, probably the rear brake was the standout for me between the two systems, and good stopping power. Engine braking as well. It's not like super V-twinish where, you know, you're really braking traction on the rear if you're too aggressive. However, at the same time, you've got plenty of engine braking there, knocking it down through those gears as well as another option apart from using the brakes themselves. And certainly when I was doing the Nasho ride, I was using the gearbox a bit. And talking about the gearbox again, the one thing I did find, very good gear changes, but I had to make sure going from first to second to third that I was properly releasing the gear lever after switching into second, because unless it returns, you get caught in the situation where you haven't let it return enough to then select third, and that's something you need to keep out for, but that's very much a rider thing and kind of just a quirk of the bike itself. Technology-wise, LCD dash, pretty cool. Mode button on the switch blocks. You've got LED lighting all around, which again, very, very nice to see. Really, with that round tail light, it's a traditional style tail light that very much suits the style of the bike. So overall, very happy there. Now, when it comes to the ergonomics of this bike, again, we get back to the bobber theme. So we've got quite a low seat height. This is a 785mm seat height. The overall ergonomic is relaxed, but I will say that there was a couple of things that stood out for me. The low seat, easy reach to the ground. The bike is quite wide and those pegs are right where I want to put my feet down, which was mainly noticeable when essentially I was putting it into neutral as I came to a stop, and then I needed to move my feet around, get it back in gear and cover the rear brake again and take off. The peg position was just a little bit awkward for me there, but I also don't ride this style of bike very often. So the familiarity of kind of those type of controls is working against me there. Apart from that, getting the kickstand down and up, getting it down is okay. Getting it up, again, the pegs are right where I wanted to kind of put my leg to get the peg up. A very small complaint, but there you have it. So as you can see here, it's really a very inviting seating position. If you're a shorter rider, I think the 785mm seat height is going to be quite inviting, as we see with a lot of these cruisers. And the reach to the bars, I've got longer legs and probably, you know, a shorter torso and arms, and I found it kept me very, very upright. I did get a little bit of strain across my shoulders, again, because I'm not really that used to this type of style bike. and I think it was probably keeping me a little bit more upright than I'm used to. However, nice and relaxed, nice wide bars, very, very easy inputs through those. As far as the foot controls as well, everything very easy there. It's just a great bike which you can just jump onto, be fairly relaxed. The suspension, as I said, on the rear was good. It wasn't like I was getting pounded by that rear suspension through my spine, which can be an issue on some bikes. And while the bike is, I think, 200 plus kilos, might be 220 fully fueled, it carries that weight very, very well, and it's certainly not something that really was ever a concern while I was riding. The weight falls away. It's got a very low center of gravity. I mean, the engine on this bike is, of course, an enormous power plant, really, at the end of the day, but it's nice and low, which certainly ensures the handling and the weight distribution and the balance in the bike is very, very good. Along a similar vein, great vision through those mirrors. I was impressed with those. Good vision of the dash. You've obviously got a very commanding view down the road because of the more relaxed style of the bike. The seat, quite comfortable, good for say an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours before really you start to kind of lose the circulation and want to get off the bike and just move around a little bit to get the comfort back. But again, you know, a really good seat as far as I'm concerned. The bars themselves, non-adjustable levers, so if you don't fit the levers, you might need to look at buying an adjustable set to work around that. But for me, I found, you know, they're pretty perfect. I'm a size large glove. And certainly one point that I would really like to make about this is that I found it's got quite a bulbous kind of tank on it, which is very narrow down at the seat and then gets much larger. It's got a little bit of a lip on it as well. And I could actually get my foot down on the pegs and my knee up under that lip, which allowed me to lock into the bike, which I really liked. And depending on your proportions, that may not be the case, but I really appreciated being able to kind of lock into the bike under the tank there, which really secured me to the bike, especially through the funner roads and the twistier roads, just because it really anchored me on the bike and just kind of, it meant that I wasn't holding on somewhere weirdly with my knees. I was just perfectly locked in, which often on a cruiser is not something that I find you can do very easily at all. All right, so my final thoughts on the V9 Bobber from Moto Guzzi. I am impressed with this bike. There's been a couple of machines in this kind of cruiser category which I've just loved because there's so much character. It's not necessarily that the performance is crazy. The W800 from Kawasaki is a similar kind of machine. The XSR 700 from Yamaha again. However, the V9 Bobber really has impressed. Now these are, I think, 19, maybe 7 on the road here in Australia. So they are by no means a really bargain priced machine, but you're getting beautiful performance. You've got getting the Moto Guzzi build quality and character, which is very, very true from that engine. There's a lot of heritage there. The build quality, I think, is good as well as the componentry, even though the suspension perhaps is a little bit on the basic side of things. For me, at 70 kilos, it did the job really, really well, so I certainly can't complain. Nice brake setup overall. The styling of the bike really stands out as well, something I like. These aren't particularly the style of bike that I love. However, I really can appreciate the styling of this machine with those small but chunky wheels and tyre setup. The exposed engine, just quite simple, but elegant. And as I said, you know, this really feels like kind of a gentleman's cruiser, or certainly I think for female riders, they would really enjoy this because fairly low seat height, very manageable machine, beautiful character. Quite often women don't tend to be quite as performance orientated as guys. And certainly if that's the case for you, you might love the V9 Bobber. Anyway, if you've got any questions at all for me, just let me know down below in the comments. I will do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching, have a great one, and stay safe out there.